lecture that I saw. I'm Richard Waller, Executive Director of the University Museums here at the University of Richmond. Thank you for joining us this evening for the opening of our exhibition, Unseen Pompeii, the photographs of William Wylie in the Laura Robbins Gallery of Design and Nature. Organized by the University Museums, the exhibition is presented in cooperation with the Department of Classical Studies. In fact, the faculty in the Classics Department initiated this collaboration with the University Museums, and you will see the outcome of that when you visit the museum this evening. The lead faculty member in this project was Walt Stevenson, and he's professor of classical studies, and he will introduce tonight's speaker. And following Bill's talk, please join us for the reception and to see the exhibition in the Laura Robbins Gallery. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I want to repeat, it's really exciting to see such a good group. Really, I think it'll be a very exciting lecture and exhibition. Just a few words of explanation how we got here. It's actually quite random in that I ran into Bill at the BMFA about 2 years ago, and I didn't know him. I was introduced to him, and he told some very entertaining stories about being in South Italy, and that led to stories about how he was doing photography there, and photography happened to be of Pompeii, and I found myself getting very excited, and so I invited him. And then I have to thank the museums for being amazingly flexible in working this thing out almost right away, so that we were able to have the show. So that was just the beginning. Then we started brainstorming about how exciting it would be to have a whole series of events about Pompeii. And so I just want to announce a few of these, and then as a member of the Classics Department, I'm going to take the privilege of announcing a few of our other lectures too. We do have right now currently in the library a show on the first floor of travel accounts to Pompeii in the late 19th century, and also an actual original photo book from the late 19th century, which after the lecture you'll see why it's relevant to what we're talking about today. So that's one that you can go and see right now. It's sort of not as clearly related. We're having a bronze pour on September 23rd, which will be an event that we're very, very excited about as classicists, because this is something we talk about all the time, and very few students have had a chance to see, but I think everyone is welcome. That will be on September 23rd in the Magdalen Arts Yard from 2 to 4. That will be Mark Rhodes and Nathan Hansen-Hilliard doing that demonstration. That brings us into the area of bronze. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of the Rodin show in the Harnett Gallery, which is really a spectacular show. I'm sure many of you have seen it already, but I hope most of you get a chance. And we have, with bronze, we have some classes that we're giving that have to do with Renaissance bronze. Our actually Roman art class will be connected to that. So we're very excited about that. Carrying on with Pompeii, we, in the University of Richmond Classics Department, we sponsor the Mediterranean Society of America. And the Mediterranean Society of America will be sponsoring a lecture on Sunday, October 2nd at 3 p.m. in Jepson 118, called Greeks and Romans in the Bay of Naples, by one of our graduates, emeritus professor from William and Mary, Julian Ward-Jones. And then we also, the Classics Department, will be sponsoring a lecture, Visiting Pompeii, Travelers' Impressions of the Ancient Town, presented by Carol Matouche. And that will be on Wednesday, October 26th at 6 o'clock in the International Center Conference. So we have a whole series of lectures on this topic. We hope that you'll all be able to make it. All right, back to William Wylie. Very excited to have him here. And a little background, his photographs and videos have been shown both nationally and internationally. His work can be found in permanent collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, National Gallery of Art, Smithsonian American Art Museum, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Virginia Museum of Fine Art, and Yale University Art Museum, among others. He has published 4 books of his work: Riverwalk from the year 2000, Stillwater from the year 2002, Carrara from 2009, Route 36 from the year 2010, and there's one in the works right now called Prairie, which will soon come out. Bill teaches at the University of Virginia. Once again, we're really excited to have him here. Please join me in welcoming.
As I was standing off to the side, I was watching this screen move back and forth, and I was thinking, look, usually I'm talking about still photography. But I like to put this picture up because it's a way to sort of introduce myself clearly, but also to talk about how pictures have sort of a life outside of what maybe they were expecting. Starting to get a little cleft already when I tell the story, but I'll get over it quickly. This is my father. And my father played football for a high school in Columbus, Ohio, and was one of the all-state players the year he was a senior. And so this was an image that was in the newspaper of the top team, the all-state players. A cousin of mine found this in a yard sale in Columbus, in one of those little cards that you put baseball cards and things in. Somebody had cut it out and preserved it, including with a little worn area in the middle, which hard to say where that came from. Like an artifact of some kind. But she just was at a yard sale and she was like, oh my gosh, that was Wylie, who she knew my dad well. So pulled it out. And so I kind of scanned it and I sort of use it as a way when people are coming into my talks to sort of put it up there. But I like that history. I like that the picture has a history outside of its original intention. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I guess also, just before I get started, I want to thank Walt for organizing the show and Richard for agreeing to do it. I'm really happy with the show and really proud of what's down there, so I want to thank them. I also want to thank Steve and Henley, the guys who put this, they framed all this stuff, they came to Charlottesville and picked all this stuff up, and it was amazing, and then put it on the wall. So the show you see down there is in great part due to them. I should also just qualify that Henley and Richard laid out the show while they were waiting for me when I was late arriving. And, you know, it was one of those wonderful things. I told Richard this story, but, you know, the poet William Stafford used to just send off a sheaf of poems to his editor, and the editor would figure out what was going to be in the book. This was really the first time I was able to just give a bunch of pictures to a gallery and come in and say, it looks great. I also want to thank Heather, who's back in the back, who's done all of the promotional stuff and preparing for all of this. It's a great crew that they have here. And then also as a way to just get it out of the way, my colleague John Dobbins is here. John is the Pompeii god, in my opinion. And of course, he's completely freaked me out by saying he was going to come to this lecture. But I may rely on him a little bit for some, you know, it's like, what was that thing again? like call him out. But John also is probably the most important reason I got to photograph Pompeii. I had the idea to go there, but as we'll talk about a little bit in this lecture, there were a lot of wheels that needed to be greased and a lot of, I mean, not palms, just wheels, but a lot of work that had to go into getting permission to make serious pictures there. And John was extremely helpful in that. They all know John. I actually got his guide who was taking me around. He's like, oh, Professor Dobbins, see, of course I know. You know, he actually worked with John on previous things. So John, thank you for all your help. Also, I wish you hadn't come. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see my notes a little bit better. As a way of starting, I just want to talk a little bit about history. Of course, most people probably recognize this picture. This is the in Richmond at the end of the Civil War. And this is the kind of picture that got me interested in photography. I came of age in photography, being started to make serious pictures in the early 80s. I was a little bit of a late bloomer. But when I started to look at serious photography, I was interested in the landscape photography that contemporary photographers were making at the time. So this is a little post-Ansel Adams. Ansel had had this sort of time a couple, 10 years earlier. So the people who were making landscape photography when I got interested in it were sort of post-Ansel Adams. And this was the kind of work that they were most interested in, Civil War photography, early Western exploration photography that wasn't making the landscape grand and wonderful, but that sort of looked at the place with a realistic eye. So, granted, this is Richmond, but this is the kind of picture that always influenced my early sort of appreciation of photography. This is Alexander Parker in 1865. The next thing I want to show you, this is just a little setup of my interest. This is the artist Hubert Robert, and if any of you have been to the National Gallery of Art recently, you've seen the wonderful show of Robert's work that's there. Not quite sure how much longer it's going to be there, but Robert was, 1756 is this drawing. Most of his paintings are quite large and elaborate, but this is a watercolor gouache kind of sketch that he did. He was making this work at the time in the 18th century when ruins were sort of a means of expression, when they looked at ruins as constituting a sort of way to express something about life, in particular, a sense of contingency, that things weren't always going to work out the way you might think they were, that you might end up, things might end up as a ruin. I mean, they were sort of looked at as proof that, you know, when putting it on my notes here, that the world we live in was a precarious one. You know, from back in the time of Poussin, all the way up through Piranesi and Robert, there was this sense that ruins were an actual vehicle for expression. One of the things I love about Robert, if you're familiar with Rome, this, oops, went too far, this pyramid in the back here is not situated near that arch. So Robert had this sort of ability, he's a French artist, he lived in Rome for a while, but he just kind of conflated things. He put things together to make a more interesting picture. But he also always had these sort of characters standing around looking like, you know, like at this impressive edifice and sort of acting like, you know, I wonder what happened here. I wonder why this isn't around anymore. I'm going to talk for a second about this picture. This is Robert McPherson, who was a well-known photographer. 1871 is the date of this picture, but he photographed Rome. And again, I'm just showing you a few things that sort of set me up for my interest in photography. I came to this picture later, I will say, but it's the kind of work that I love. And you know, one of the things that I like about this kind of a picture is the sense that sometimes there's indirect traces within the picture that sort of give you a glimpse of history that's not necessarily the same as say, the social history. So I want to just talk through this picture a little bit. This is World Turco, which is that sort of twisted wall, that the area of Rome. It was part of the Aurelian wall, and it held up the big hill that sits behind it. Since ancient times, the hill had sort of pushed down on the wall and had sort of warped it and bent it. Most artists would photograph, or photograph at the time, McPherson was doing it, but also depict it, draw it, from an angle that would show how it loomed and veered out over the top of the road and was sort of precarious as it sat there. But what I love about this picture is that McPherson sort of positioned himself to show this is all part of the World Tour down here too, and not where the wall is like ready to fall down, but he sort of was interested in the light down there. And so he's got this great afternoon light falling on the wall that's not the sort of scary part of the wall, but when to be able to compositionally position himself there, where he placed himself in the middle here, he ends up having the center of the World Tour right in the middle of this picture. But the thing that fascinates me the most and I love is, I'm sorry we can't blow this up, but this little teeny detail right here. It's a chalk drawing that's on the wall of the World Turco. And the research that I've done and people have talked about this picture to me, the time that McPherson made this picture, Well, first off, McPherson's standing just outside of a gate, which is right on that over to the left of the picture. That is an entrance to the Borghese Gardens. And that gate had been closed for over 40 years at the time that this picture was made. And they had just shut it off and they weren't letting people go in there. This drawing that's on the wall here, this little chalk drawing, which we could blow it up because it's very cool, is a drawing of the gate itself. And you can actually see part of the Borghese eagle just up there in the left corner of the picture that's on top of the gate. And the speculation is that this drawing was made by an engineer or a contractor of some kind as they were trying to sort of figure out how they were going to move it, which they eventually did. They moved the gate into the Borghese Gardens and turned it back into an entrance. But it wasn't going to come from this place. So that little detail, by the way, the fact 1871 of this picture, that gate wasn't moved until 1930 by Mussolini. So that's classic Italian, right? They've been planning it for a while, and it took them a little bit longer to get that done. But that little bit of history is like a wonderful part of that picture, and it's something that I love about the way photographs carry meaning. Just a few other important influences on my work. Eugene Auger, French photographer from the turn of the century, looked at the sort of changing scene of Paris, not necessarily interested in ruins, although he did photograph ruins. He was really more interested in looking at what was there before it was all taken away. I think I have one more Auger scene, but a shot like this is going to be very reminiscent in that one of what I eventually do with Pompeii. I mean, one of the things artists do is we don't always like to call it stealing, but you see something in somebody else's picture and you figure out how to incorporate that. So it's possible. Another artist that's really meant a lot to me, and again, these pictures, when you see what I did in Pompeii, you'll recognize where I got the idea. Walker Evans, a great American photographer, but in particular, what I sort of learned from him, maybe that's a good way to say it, what I learned from Evans' work is the way he used light and shadow. And that's why I, in particular, put sort of an unknown Evans picture on the left there. But just the way he could turn the facade of his church into something way more dynamic simply by that diagonal shadow and the sunlight there is an amazing feat. It's a beautiful building, but made all the more dramatic and dynamic by that shadow. A couple of other people. This will sound funny to a few people here, but I can't really say that Danny Lyons was an influence on me. This is a famous Danny Lyons photograph. But these particular pictures, Danny Lyons is a wonderful man. Let me just add. But this particular is from a series, is from a series of pictures he did in Lower Manhattan when they were clearing out all that landscape to make room for what eventually became the World Trade Towers and other things. But they were demolishing these great old parts of the city, and Danny Lyons went in there and photographed it. Another thing you can see in this picture, so I did not know this picture before I started my work, but in looking at other photographers' work, I can look at something like this and say, he's doing a very similar thing. When we get to my pictures, you'll see it, but I just want to say, look at the way space is depicted in this picture. Where does one wall end and another wall begin? How far back is some of those things? This has become my favorite Danny Lyons picture of all time. Bernd and Hillebecker, the German photography duo, photographing industrial structures as sort of post, ruins. Oh my gosh, we've got people all the way out in the hall there. But these artists and the way they depicted buildings, and again, very contemporary conceptual photography, but from the 70s, 80s, a little bit of the 60s, 90s, really influenced the way I sort of looked at buildings and so forth. Before I jump into the Pompeii work, Walt mentioned my book on Carrara, and I just thought I'd share a couple of pictures from those because that's what gets me to Italy eventually. Carrara, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a major marble quarry in Tuscany, in northern Tuscany. I was shown this place in the year 2000 by some ex-students of mine, and made a couple of pictures, and by the time I got back to Virginia and looked at the negatives, I was like, okay, I'm sold, this is a project, and I worked on it for 9 years. Not exclusively, I did other things too, but I went back over and over and over again to continue to photograph in Carrara. So this is one of my pictures of Carrara, and the sort of, some of the ways in which the hillsides are sort of cut into. I love the fact that it is very much like, if you know Cézanne's work from the Business Quarry or some other things, very much a little bit more sharp-edged, but it reminded me of Cézanne so much that I wanted to keep working with it. Just a couple of more snapshotty things, but to give you a sense of what happens in Carrara. This, first off, that's awesome. like who wouldn't want to be driving that thing, right? That's amazing. But, you know, here they are, so this, the front end of this, the bucket of this thing is down in a little crack that they've created, and it's going to eventually push that thing over. And so that is a giant slab of marble that, it's a little hard to see, but down on the ground here they have piled up dirt. Like big, you know, it's about this deep. And so when that thing goes over, it doesn't hit more marble and just shatter. And the other thing they can do with it, I'm not sure if the next picture shows this, a little bit. So there's a big slab like that. But they can actually pass underneath it these cable drills or cable saws, and you pass it up underneath it and then work with the saws to cut them down to more manageable sizes. So putting it on the dirt both keeps it from breaking, but also allows them to sort of work with it. A couple of my more refined pictures. I think this one's up at the VMFA right now. The VMFA has a couple of my friends. I think this is the one that they have up. And then just a pairing of two other of the blocks. What I mainly did in Carrara, so that first picture, I did do some sort of more overall landscape views, but what I mainly did was I looked at the blocks as sort of portraits. You know, each one as it came off of the mountainside, and the way they cut it, the way this sort of slurry would sort of sit on the face of it, became very individual to me. And so I also, thinking of the Beckers, if you know that work, I started to do a typology. You know, always putting the block right in the middle of the picture, sort of not limiting what was going on behind it necessarily, but looking at these in relationship to each other. While I was in Carrara, photographing, occasionally there would be rainy days, and I couldn't go up into the quarries. There's a really wonderful art school in Carrara, and it's mainly, as you can imagine, known for sculpture. So on the rainy days, I would go in there and walk around with my camera, and I got to know the professors there and a lot of the students, and so people would be like, you know, oh, we got to see this place, you know. They'd like open this door and be a room like this full of these reproductions that would be brought out for students to copy. So I mean, that's of course the way artists traditionally have learned, is you copy another work, and once you make that, you're like, okay, now I can do that, now I can go off on my own. So there would be all these, some people might be able to recognize some of these pieces, but all these fantastic copies back in storage rooms. So I was photographing things like that, photographing casts. You know, this was this full body cast that was in the middle of the room, and you know, just looking at the art school, of course, everything else in this picture is very art school accoutrement, right? The little drawing easels, the boards. But this place, because it's been around for such a long time, has this unbelievable collection of things to work with. This was a plaster cast that was just hanging on a rod for students to draw, because most sculptors wanted to be able to sketch really well, as we know, Michelangelo and all of those guys could do it fairly well, right? So I started working with that, and around that same time, I discovered this picture, and this is where Pompeii comes in. This is the famous dog from Pompeii. Some of you who have been there have probably seen it. But the photograph is by Giorgio Sommer, a German man who moved to Naples and had a commercial photography studio. And is the book you guys have, Walt, is that a Giorgio Sommer book?
Do you remember what the author of that book is?
The travel book? No, okay. So one of the things that Sommer did is he made photographs for tourists. He produced volumes. You could go and buy the Pompeii volume. It was, he also had a studio where you could go in at the time and pick and choose your pictures, and then they would put them in a volume. So not all the volumes that come out are exactly the same. But he made this photograph, and I always loved it, and it related to those plaster casts from the school in Carrara, and this was the first Giorgio Sommer photograph I bought. And I searched far and wide now. Of course, I run into him all the time, but I spent a lot of time trying to find this picture, and I was able to get it. Some of these are actually from John's collection. John has a fantastic collection of the plaster casts photographs, but these are all Giorgio Sommer. And Sommer, when being in Naples, was hired to be the photographer to sort of photograph, and I mean, he probably also worked it out because he didn't even sell those pictures, to really document Pompeii during the time that they were doing excavation. And a couple of things I love about these pictures and what they reveal is his manipulation. You can see that the dog was this way, but since it was corner to corner, let me go back just one. It just seems like it's in this black space. You can kind of make out that there's a little bit of an edge right back there, and there's a platform. But the blackness doesn't really do anything but make the plaster, white plaster cast stand out. But look at some of these pictures. You can actually see where the cloth that he's laid the figures on doesn't extend all the way out to the edge of the picture. This one, the figure's laying on kind of a pile of dirt, and then there's this black cloth like behind it to give it a silhouette. It's unclear whether he thought he was going to sort of like manipulate these pictures a little bit because they're a little haphazard. Look at this guy down here. And even this one where he's got it on the background with the way it's on the table there, I mean, that's actually a favorite picture of mine. But the rest of them, I love them all, but I love their sort of like goofiness in terms of the background. I teach photography. If one of my students was trying to do some still life and came in with that background, I'd be like, what are you doing? Why don't you just move that cloth over a little bit more? But they are Giorgio's pictures, and they're the thing that we now, when people look at them, it's like, that's the character of those pictures so much. One more. And he was, it must have been amazing for him to be able to just say to those guys, can you guys get that one over, stick it over there on that pile of dirt, and just set it up the way you wanted to. But these are fantastic pictures. Just a couple more of mine from the school in Carrara. I wanted to say, I was very influenced by Giorgio's plaster cast pictures at this moment in my life. So this is obviously the famous La Group, but a replica, obviously. And this was another piece from the school of Carrara. Just sitting in the hall. You can see back in the back there is like a drawing classroom. All right, on to Pompeii. Let's get on with that. This is another Giorgio Sommer photograph. So Sommer not only made large prints that he would put into volumes or sell individually, but he made cabinet cards for people. And this was, he happened to be there when Vesuvius erupted again, considering he was the Pompeii photographer at the time. It's nice for him to get a volcanic eruption also back in his oeuvre, right? But these pictures that he made of the eruption are fantastic. They're hard to find or / afford to buy those, and I do collect Giorgio Sommer photographs, but I was able to collect this little cabinet card, and one of the things I love about these things, even as regular prints, is the sort of advertising on it. So you really want to make sure you knew who the photographer was. The other cool thing about the volcanic eruption is it actually tells you down here what time it was, the day and the time when this picture was made, because he's got a whole series of these particular pictures and they're at different times. A couple more Giorgio Sommers of Vesuvius. A little hard to see in here, partly because this is a little bit on the dark side, but the other thing that he and a lot of 19th century photographers did was stick a person in the picture, or more than one person. Oftentimes for scale, but, so here you can see the white pants of this guy crossing his leg. My little pointer's not working so well, but the white pants. So there's a very Victorian-looking guy sitting there with his legs crossed. He's probably got a top hat on. I can't remember in this picture. But I love the craziness of that. Here's a guy like in a giant field of lavas, right? In his little suit coat and his tie. Oftentimes there's women. I thought there was a woman in this one, but maybe it's another one. Well, oftentimes there's women with parasols and they're just standing up there in this giant lava field. So fantastic pictures if you ever get a chance to run into them. An eruption, obviously this stuff is added later. I shouldn't say obviously, but he did a little bit of like, okay, it's a volcano, but we want it to be a little threatening, not just a big lump of earth. So paint in a little, and so we're getting ready to look at my pictures. So knowing this picture well, I tried to take my own one day when the first time we were there. I didn't have that picture to reference, so I didn't realize how far away I was. But this was sort of coming up from where we were staying in Italy to start photographing in Pompeii. This was like my view of the thing that had been the center of my attention for many years. Trying to collect those Vesuvius pictures, trying to buy as many Giorgio Sommer. These were all eBay purchases, by the way. Which I'll get on there, I'm sorry. But back in the day, you could get them really cheap. Now, the good ones are quite a bit more expensive, unfortunately. But I was buying up everything I could, so finally, here was my opportunity to see Vesuvius. Pompeii sits back on this side. Is that about right now? I didn't necessarily climb Vesuvius right away because I was anxious to photograph in Pompeii, and that's an entire whole story which I'll give the like 2-minute version of. John had cleared the way for me to do this. We had permission. We had everybody saying like, "No problemo, come on, we got it, we got it." And when I showed up there the first day, they were like, "Can you come back tomorrow?" By the way, it's a little hour-and-a-half drive, practically, to where I was staying. So I was like, okay, I want to ruffle any feathers, and it was a day like this, by the way. Next day I go back, the superintendent's very busy, can you come back tomorrow? Another day like this. This happened 5 days in a row. The 6th day, I've been watching the weather, and you've got this ocean out here, right, this sea, so all this bad weather was coming, and if you don't realize it, as a photographer, you need a little bit of light to do your work or do it right. And also because I was interested in that walk around in the shadowy thing. I wanted good so on. So on the 6th day when I went in there, they were like, "Oh, so sorry." The superintendent is very, very busy and unable to sort of deal with your request right now. And I kept saying, Dobbins, clear the way. Come on. We got all these, we got emails showing, and they just be like, "I'm so sorry. I kind of like lost it at that point. and I was just like, the weather's going to change, and I just didn't know what quite to do. But right at that moment, the superintendent came out of the box. They had actually told me she was not on site. And she's a very imposing woman too, by the way, but turned out to be a sweetheart. But she goes walking out of her office with all these suits around her, right? These important people. And I just was like, screw it. If I lose my whole opportunity, I got to get this done. So I sort of walked over in front of her, and then people who were like working with me were like, "Ugh!" And I get them, and I'm like, "Scusi," and I don't speak Italian well, but I was like, I really need to do, and then she was like, "Come on." She's trying to just dismiss me because it was such an affront to these other like well-dressed people who were probably important people, right? She just was like, come on. And I was like, "There, for sure. And she's like, "60, come on. And I turned to the other people, and I was like, "You heard that." And the next day, when I showed up, by the way, it's starting to get a little cloudy now, but when I showed up, they were all just like, "Professor Wylie, oh, you're so honored for you to be here." And then they handed me this piece of paper that basically just gave me carte blanche access to anything I wanted, which was amazing. So, they worked it out. So one more shot of Vesuvius with this is probably an iPhone. But A couple of Giorgio Somers pictures. I threw that other one in there just because it's a similar view of Vesuvius, but you can see a couple of things that Giorgio did. First off, really great light, right? So fantastic shadows. But the other thing that I noticed early in my interest in Giorgio Somers pictures in Pompeii is that compression of space I was talking about in the Danny Lyons picture. It's not quite as obvious here because of the way he used the shadows, but Pompeii was tailor-made for work that does that, which is what I sort of took to heart. A few more things, a couple of Apollo, right, John? With Vesuvius looming in the background. That was one of the things Giorgio seemed to do quite a bit, don't you think? He's like always stuck the volcano back there and say like, the reason it looks like this is because of that. You know? Kind of like the McPherson piece. John and I were trying to figure out where this was and couldn't quite identify it. But you can get a sense of what Giorgio does. Sometimes there's like information in the pictures too, which was good. They come in, these by the way are all albumen prints. The reason they look this sort of tone is they're early photographic processes where the silver was supported by egg white. And you could commercially buy the paper, but early on photographers used to make their own emulsions, but later on it was commercially available. Age's pictures, remember they had that same tone, also albumen pictures. This is a recent purchase of mine, and I'm not even 100% sure this relief is from Pompeii, but it's a Giorgio Sommer, and it says Pompeii over there, but this is clearly in the Archaeological Museum, would you say, in Naples? I'm looking to John for some verification, but this is a recent purchase of mine, and the reason I bought it was not necessarily, I do think that the cast of characters is wonderful, but, and compositionally, you know, everything from this like light coming in the window here to this female figure sort of looking off to the side and sort of moving you across the screen. But my favorite part of it is Giorgio's gear. I love the fact that in the picture you see his camera equipment like sitting in the back. That was like so unusual in a sense for him to just leave, not necessarily Giorgio, but in these pictures, because these guys are working with a big old view camera. Everything's set up. They've got their sometimes glass plates that they've prepared. They're loading their cameras. They left nothing like that to chance. Nothing. So the fact that Giorgio, whether he might have been like my experiences where they're saying like, you got to get out of here in 5 minutes, and he's like hurrying up and he took it, but probably not. Giorgio. Couple more Giorgio songs. I threw this in. It's a little fuzzy because I actually took it as a screenshot off of the computer because it's something that I'm going back to Pompeii this winter for another, hopefully actually my last trip there because I'm going to try to put a book together of these pictures. But as you'll see with my pictures, there's no people. And one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, Giorgio often would have a figure or something in there for scale oftentimes, but, and I realized, first off, it's very hard to take a picture of Pompeii without people. If you've been there before, you know how absolutely crowded it can be. I have worked there only in the winter, which is less crowded, but it doesn't mean not crowded. There's still a lot of people. So, one of my great guide stories, by the way, so they hooked me up with this guide early on. The superintendent was like, here's your piece of paper, and here is Sabini, your guide. And so Sabini's like, I know everything. He's the guy that worked with John, by the way, too. So I told Sabini I was interested in Giorgio Sommer, and I wanted to sort of look at the places Sommer had photographed and see how they changed in 150 years. And Sabini was like, there's a picture by Sommer, there's a picture. And then one day, my pictures deviate from Sommer's quite a bit. On this particular day, I was looking underneath my dark cloth, and I realized the thing over here is really kind of more interesting. And I shifted the camera, and when you're under one of these dark cloths, you're looking through the lens, and everything is upside down and backwards. Because it's unlike a camera with a mirror, like a single lens reflex camera. It's just straight coming to the lens, and it gets flipped and upside down. So so you compose upside down on the screen. But I'm looking through this thing, and I'm like, that's kind of cool. I'm trying to focus, and all of a sudden, from the top of the frame comes Sabini's head. He's like, it's right in the middle of my thing. So I'm right side up, but Sabini's upside down, and he's like, no, Giorgio Sommer. And I was like, yeah, but, and he's like, no. He wouldn't let me take the picture because it wasn't a Giorgio soccer. And the superintendent had said, this guy wants to look at Giorgio soccer. So he was like totally manipulating, controlling it. By the way, I eventually ditched him. He did everything by cell phone, and he'd be like, William, where are you? And I was like, I'm at the amphitheater. And I realized that I was nowhere near there. Like, okay, 5 minutes.